You know, it's funny. We have Fred, the flat-headed flea, to blame for being here today. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but Fred, and you can call him Sir Fred if you like, that's his formal name. He didn't always have a flat head. Let me tell you how he came to have this flat head. He was walking down the street, minding his own business, having a good old time. He had a good life, normal, everyday things, and all of a sudden, fate stepped out of nowhere and grabbed him, plucked him up off the street, and put him into this mason jar with a lid on it. And so Fred, like many of us, most of us, does not like being trapped, does not like being controlled. So feeling stuck, what does he do? He tries to get out, right? So he can't push the jar over. He can't wrestle it down. So a flea can jump, though, and jump really high, really strong. And he was like the best jumper in his class, So he starts jumping. And what does he do? Well, he smacks into the lid. And it hurts, right? But he doesn't care because he's getting out of there. He's determined, and all the things that his coaches told him, and jumping classes, and everything that his dad taught him about. Winners never quit and quitters never win, and all of that conditioning, all of that programming took over. And so what does he do? He jumps even harder, and he bangs his head into the lid of the jar. And of course, that's how he got his flat head. But that's not the whole story. Because what ended up happening is that he continued to, the fact that he flattened his head and hurt himself and he caused himself pain and he conditioned himself and he got that flat head, did that change the fact that he still wanted to get out of the jar? No, he still wanted freedom. That didn't change anything, but he still felt stuck. He still felt trapped in that jar because he was, right? And he had that limitation, the lid on the jar. So what does he do? Well, he teaches himself how to continue to try to get out of the jar, but not feel the pain anymore. So for him, that means he only jumps as high as the lid. He's capable, because he's the best jumper around, of jumping, much higher than where the lid is, but he's jumping, he trained himself, he conditioned himself to only jump just high enough to get to the lid so that he could still feel good about doing something, trying to have a modicum of control over his life, to try, still jumping for freedom because he still wants to get out. So he continues to try, he continues to work at it, works really hard at it, but he's only jumping as high as the lid. Fate steps in again, takes the lid of the jar off. And so Fred goes, oh, this is my chance, right? I'm going to jump right out of here because I'm perfectly capable, right? So he goes, I'm out of here. See you later. I'm out. Unfortunately, no. See, because again, he's conditioned himself because of that pain to believe that the lid's still there. So to him, jumping any higher than the lid is equals pain, because that's what gave him the flat head. So he will continue to jump and jump and jump and jump, being perfectly capable, having no limits on him anymore, being perfectly capable of escape, perfectly capable of getting out of that jar. He stays stuck, unfortunately, in that jar, but it's a limitation that of his own making. It's a jail, if you will, a prison of his own making, because of the fact that he conditioned himself to avoid that pain, and he doesn't challenge it. But now here's an interesting thing that's happened to him, is that the reason he's going to die in there, unless somebody comes along and tips the jar over, or fate steps in and takes him out of there again, or something happens outside of his control, he's going to die in there because he's believes now that his reality is he's trapped. He's accepted that reality. He's accepted that he's now trapped, and he's going to continue to jump because he can't sell out on himself, right? He can't feel like giving up, but he's only jumping as high as that lid once was, and he's burning himself out. He's never going to be able to get out of there unless he does something about that conditioning. Now you say, well, I'm not Fred. You're not Fred. Or are we? Because we all have these flat-headed flea stories, meaning that we conditioned ourselves to believe things that may or may not be true anymore. So based upon the reality of the great unwashed reality of the entire world, right? And that's unknowable to us as a whole, right? We select based on our experiences a small subset of that to tap into. And then we give our attention to a little bitty piece of that we focus on, and that becomes what we condition ourselves to believe is our reality or is true. And what's strange is that Fred didn't know that he conditioned himself, didn't know that this limitation was there, didn't realize that he did it. But it still didn't change the fact that he's limiting himself. And so for him, that is his reality, right? That is what he believes is what's possible, what's impossible. The way it is, the way life is the way that he conditioned himself to believe it. So these Fred stories, as I call them, they get conditioned in us at very early ages, right? And we, just like Fred, we have no idea that they're even going on. They become unconscious. At one point, it was very conscious, but it got conditioned into us, and it happened, and so now we don't even see it anymore, even though it's there. So it becomes part of like a computer operating system, if you will, our base operating system, where it's who we are. It's part of our identity, right? So let me give you an example of one of my early Fred stories. I was either 10 or 11, somewhere around there, and my father was a good dad from a standpoint of being a friend. He was a good friend, but he was a lousy father. He was a lousy provider, and that was part of his whole shtick. And he was supposed to, hang out with me every other weekend and take care of me, and we were supposed to do fun things and, father, dad, son time together. And almost always he would not be present. He would call and cancel either at the very last second or at, prior to, and change the game. And so I always felt constantly let down. But this one time, I was really excited because he was taking me to go for an entire weekend upstate New York. I lived in New York City, and he was taking me, he picked me up at my mom's house and took me to upstate New York, and we were going to have an entire weekend together where we were going to bike ride all over the place and have all this fun time together, just dad and me. So we're driving up there, and he didn't cancel. Surprise, surprise, I wasn't let down. And so we go up there and we start going, and it turns out the real reason behind his need for that trip upstate was that he needed to visit his drug dealer supply house so that he could then turn around and sell to his clients and customers for that month. And that wasn't the crappy part. The crappy part was that he left me for several hours on the side of the road. He didn't want to take me to the supplier's house so that I didn't know where it was, and so that it would, quote unquote, protect me, right? So that I would be protected and I couldn't tell anybody, where it was if I was picked up and questioned. And of course, I told him, Dad, I would never drop a dime on you. I would never tell anybody where this is. So, you wouldn't have to leave me, you wouldn't have to abandon me on the road and leave me there. Like, why did you, leave me there for so long? And he said, well, if you got picked up by a rival gang and they tortured you, then you'd have to tell them where the drugs are and where my supplier is. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's great parenting, because so it's okay to abandon me, but don't you realize that if this gang is going to pick me up and torture me, do they, whether I know where it is or not, they're still going to torture me. So that's great parenting, great way to protect your son. And so one of the core things that had been instilled into me, conditioned into me, was that the people that are supposed to protect you, that are supposed to look out for you, supposed to provide for you, are going to constantly let me down. They're going to constantly abandon me. So it's up to me to, kind of take control back over my life. And so from an early age, the way that this conditioned into me was, I can't trust anybody but myself, and the pursuit of freedom for me, having control, being able to write my own destiny, have some say, not being abandoned on the side of the road, not being left for hours at a time, not being let down at the last possible minute, about honoring your word, being a part, and having those experiences. So to me, my pursuit was money equals freedom, because if I have a lot of money, I can do whatever I want to do. Nobody can tell me. It's all up to me. I can do, that was me, Fred, slapping his head into the jar was all of the conditioning about being abandoned, all of that stuff. I was conditioned there. I didn't know it, right? But it instilled in me that desire for freedom. And in my head, freedom meant becoming a millionaire, having lots of money, having lots of freedom equaled lots of money. So my entire pursuit, my entire focus from even earlier than 10 or 11, I can remember as far back as 6 being very focused in on money. And it was, again, because of this fear of being abandoned, of being let down. And the stories go back farther with my dad and with that fear of abandonment. It even goes back, believe it or not, to birth, from birth to 2 months old. And it's not logical, but it's there, and it became conditioned into me, and it became my Fred story that became a part of my kind of invisible operating system, if you will, that I didn't know was controlling me, that was limiting my experience or what I believed was possible for me, or how I had it wired in my head and conditioned myself to believe that this Fred story meant that this was the only way that I could have this plus this equals this has to be. That was my, the only way that it could be. That was the formula, if you will. Let me give you an example of my earliest Fred story. And it's a very personal one, so bear with me for a second. When I was 2 months old, to the day that I was 2 months old, my mother died. She had a brain aneurysm. And she passed away when I was 2 months old. And my father was left with a 2-month-old baby, and he was doing the best he could. He's a professional musician. He had the lifestyle of the professional musician, but besides having a 2-month-old baby to raise, he just lost the love of his life when she passed away. And so he did the only thing that he could do, given the situation, to get some relief, which was take me from New York and give me to my grandparents, his parents, in Boston to raise me, because he was messed up. He was all screwed up. So he did that, looking out for me, and then he went on with his own Fred story, but continued to abuse drugs, and it was an IV drug user, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But here's an example of completely unconscious. I was conditioned at an early age about being abandoned. And you say, well, I didn't consciously choose that story, and how could I even remember it? Yet, on an energetic level, does a child know that his mother isn't there anymore? Yes. Does a child know that, why does, when a baby, an infant, a 2-month-old cry, does the mom's breast lactate? Because there's a physical connection, or an energetic connection, if you will. And so I knew, even though I was in an environment where I was very much loved, and where I had, my grandparents and my aunts and uncles all chipped in and took, extra care with me and gave me extra love from that side, I lost my mom and dad and was abandoned at 2 months old. The people energetically that I'm supposed to be able to depend on aren't there anymore. And so at 2 months old, I know that I had a Fred story that started to get conditioned into me that says, I have to be able to rely only on myself, because I'm going to be abandoned. I'm going to be let down. Now, how did I know this throughout life? I didn't. It's only now, looking back on it, that I can evaluate that and even have that ring true to me, and have it make sense. And that's the backbone, if you will. Took me almost 50 years. I'm now 51 going on 52, but I didn't start realizing this stuff till I was like 48 or 49 years old, something like that. and start developing the I Unstuck technology. And it is a revolutionary technology, and that's what we're all about. It's about how do we rid ourselves, how do we eliminate, how do we dissolve the Fred stories that are holding us back, that we don't even know are holding us back, that we don't even know that are limiting us. How do we recognize something that's unconscious, something that we are incapable of seeing because it is unconscious? How do you make conscious unconsciousness, right? It's crazy. That's the core, that's the essence of why I say we have Fred, the flat-headed flea, to blame for us being here together and having this ability to see a new path, a new hope in terms of getting unstuck, but not getting unstuck in a way that is temporary. Getting unstuck, for me, well, here's an example, right? So I equated freedom with money, and not just a little bit of money, a lot of money. For me, I had to become a millionaire, so that became the focus. So I became a motivation junkie, a self-help junkie, a personal development junkie, which means that, of course, I bought all the books and tapes. I read, went to all the seminars, went to all the late night infomercials, watched them, bought all those programs. And by the time I was, I guess, 23, 24 years old, thereabouts, I had over $65,000 worth of the training programs that I had accumulated in the pursuit of that freedom that I wanted, that quest to silence that pain of the fear of that abandonment, to overcome that, to give myself that space, right? Did I have the money? No. Did I have the even some of the success? Well, I was stuck in that cycle where I got excited. I got the next book or the next audio tape program, and it was the cassette programs, not 8-track, but cassette programs way back then. I'd pop it in. I'd get real excited and jacked up with the potential, with the hope that I saw in it, that this time it's going to be different. And you know what? I learned a lot. I got a lot of great insights in there, and a lot of it was groundbreaking. A lot of it was good shit that was, incredible stuff, but it wasn't incredible for me then. And what I mean is that it didn't work for me then, or it only worked temporarily because I experienced what I call the snapback. And I'm sure that you can relate to this on some level, where we have a modicum of success and all of a sudden we are starting to see some sort of breakthrough, and it's good for a time, but then it snaps back to the way things were. It's like the yo-yo dieting, right? We lose a little bit of weight, but then we yo-yo back up, and we gain the weight back and more. The people that win the lottery, it's almost cliche now, but 99.9% of the people that have won the lottery are dead broke or worse than dead broke today because they've lost the money that's associated with. That was me. So what I'm getting at is that I got enough of those things to overcome some of the Fred stories through sheer force, sheer willpower. I gritted it out. I muscled it into place. And what ended up happening is that eventually, by the time I was 32, I became a millionaire for the first time. I got it. And it turned me inside out. It was incredible. And I thought, now I've got the freedom that I want. And it only lasted, again, the feeling of not, of being worthy, of being, finally having made it, only lasted for a little bit by comparison. And I experienced the snapback again, where at first it wasn't in the monetary sense, the material world sense. It was in terms of just how I was feeling inside. I still felt insecure. I still felt like I wasn't doing enough, like I wasn't worthy enough, like I didn't earn enough, or I didn't contribute enough. I didn't make enough of an impact, or there could always be more. And so maybe the answer is that is to have more money, since it's not quieting that pain that I'm feeling, that I'm still don't trust people. I still feel like I'm going to be abandoned. I still feel this pain None of it's there. I mean, none of it's going away. Well, let me do it again. And so I did do it again and bigger and set a bigger goal, and I went after it and drove, and I became successful for successful's sake, and for this driving bigger for the sake of driving bigger. But here's something that even that achieving those goals didn't matter, didn't even feel as good as the first time that I had that first taste of success. So what was going on? Well, I didn't know this, but again, unconsciously, I had a different Fred story, I guess, running me, because what I did was I sabotaged my success. And so I lost all my money, and I went broke. And then I made it all back again. And somehow the comeback kid, right, that story of the comeback felt even better than doing it the first time, because I overcame it. I was Fred now, and not only did I get stuck in that jar once, but and wrestle my way out, but now I did it again. I'm coming back, and I'm not letting, and so what ended up happening from the time that I became a millionaire the first time to the time that I was 42, when I had, basically a nervous breakdown, a midlife crisis at 42, was that I made and lost millions. When I turned 42, I stopped and I said that this sucks. I'm tired of this snapback. I'm tired of always reverting backwards. It's like, no matter what I do, I can't ever get off this gerbil wheel. And so, yeah, I might have all the toys. I might have the $1 million mansion. I might have experienced what it's like to fly in a private jet, or to rent an island in the British West Indies with some friends at $50,000 a night, and all that, stuff that's, frankly, when I think about it now, is embarrassing. But back then, it was like I wore it as a badge of honor, as a a status symbol, as all this stuff proved, at least to the outside world, let me pretend that everything was outstanding, that none of my Fred stories were real, and because nobody else knew about them, but I did. The only problem is I didn't know that they were running me. And so that was the beginning of really starting to do some soul searching and look for what are some things that I can do. And I really realized that I wasn't happy, that it wasn't, that I wanted to do something meaningful. And basically, the bottom line was that I realized, and maybe you can relate, I don't know if you can or not, but for me, I knew that I was supposed to be more, that I was supposed to do more, that I was supposed to make a bigger impact, create more value in the world for myself and for the world at large than I was doing right then. Like my whole focus was just about the money, just about, driving for more and bigger and setting bigger goals. So I became this motivation junkie, as this product of the self-help industry. And when I say motivation junkie, what I mean is that I'm looking for the next thing that's going to give me that booster shot in the arm, that's going to charge me up, that's going to take me to the next level. The problem was that it was only temporary, that it always snapped back. And so when I decided to do some soul searching and shut my entire business operations down, I had several companies running and several businesses, and I shut everything down for two reasons. One, I wanted to do something that would be inspiring and meaningful for the rest of my life, that was going to make the impact and make the meaningful impact that I could be proud of, and so that I could know that I'm, not having regrets, that I'm not dying with regrets, that I'm also doing what I'm supposed to do and leaving it all out there, so to speak. That was number one. Number two was what I now know are my Fred stories, recognize them, and so that what I didn't know then, but I now have come to realize, is that it's not enough to just, if you ignore Fred, he doesn't go away. He's still in there. He's still got the conditioning in there. And so you can overpower Fred, and you can work really hard, but that requires force, that requires effort. And so I wanted to figure out a way. I didn't know that I now have the benefit of hindsight looking back on it over the last 10, 11 years. I now know that what I was really looking to do was to recognize what these Fred stories are and dissolve them. And because if I dissolved them on any subject, and we all have Fred stories, which are unconscious conditioning that we didn't choose, that isn't necessarily serving us. In fact, I would define a Fred story as it's not helping what we want to have happen. So if we want to get unstuck on any particular subject, if we want something that we don't yet have right now in our experience, we're stuck, right? And we want to get unstuck. We want to go for something that we want. And if we are not seeing the results, if we're not able to get there or we don't stay there, we have some sort of a Fred story that's been unconsciously conditioning us, working against us getting unstuck on the subject, working against us getting what we want to have happen in life. And so what I now know, and what the whole purpose behind the I Unstuck technology that I haven't seen anywhere else, at least in this fashion, is how do we R&D our Fred stories, which is recognize that they're going on a particular subject, and how do we dissolve them? Because if they are simply no longer there, well then all that information, all that knowledge, all that learning, all that effort, all those different things that I tried, which now are well over $1.5 million, if not $2 million worth of training and programs and different things that I've educated myself and consumed over the last since I was like 8 years old, so last 40-something years of my life, if I don't have a Fred story there that's working against me, and I'm now able to allow the flow to happen, if I can focus on it, now it's easy. It becomes the path of least resistance. It becomes a downstream feeling instead of struggling for it and working for it, because I'm not having to overpower the Fred story to get where I want to go, if that makes sense. That's the whole purpose behind the I Unstuck technology, and why I call it a technology and why I believe it's revolutionary is because it's all about how I can, in myself first and foremost, I did it for me, to recognize, to R&D my Fred stories, to recognize that the Fred stories are going on when they happen, that they're unconsciously taking me, the unconscious conditioning that I've allowed to be put in place are somehow limiting what I want to have happen on a particular subject. Recognize it first and make the unconscious conscious, and then dissolve that Fred story. I don't have to willpower, I don't have to grit it, I can allow the Fred story to dissolve. And that's the whole core of what this community is all about. That's what the mission here is to work right there. Because I don't know if there's 1,000 people just like me, but I'm sure it's more like 1 billion people just like me that are frustrated because no matter how hard they work at something, no matter what program they do, if you don't deal with the Fred stories that are sitting in here, controlling you, then it doesn't matter how hard you work. You can work 18 hours a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whatever, to overcome that, to sheer force of will and to do it and and it doesn't matter if you've got Fred working against you, because eventually you can't ever take a break. You're going to burn out no matter what, because the instant Fred never takes a break. You don't hear Fred sometimes because you're so busy over here, but the instant that you're tired because you have to work so hard, you take a break, what happens? It snaps back the other way. And boom, you're right back where you were or thereabouts. And so you find yourself coming into that same brick wall again and again and again. And so that's why we've got to R&D Fred for you. We've got to recognize what Fred's you've got going on, what Fred stories you have, and we've got to dissolve them away. Now, I love to tell you that I'm this enlightened being and I have this all down and I do this perfectly in myself. The fact of the matter is that I'm still working on this. I am not this guru, sitting on the mountain. That this is about a community. It's about, like-minded weirdos like me teaming up and standing for one another, having a place to call home where we can work on this together. Because I'll let you in on a little secret. it's a whole lot easier for me to see your Fred stories and point them out to you, and for you to see my Fred stories and point them out to me, because we're most blind. You're not blind to my unconsciousness. I'm not blind to yours. But we are, until we learn how to do it and we start to get into the habit. And I've gotten pretty good at being able to recognize it and coach myself on it, but it doesn't mean that I've eliminated all my Fred stories, that I've dissolved them all. I haven't. For me, what's meaningful is to bring this body of work, these tools, these resources, this technology really, to the masses and evolve it with you and to work together with you to do that. So the I part in the I Unstuck is for two reasons. Why? One, it's kind of like the online technology of the iPods and the iPhones and all of that, and it leaves that feeling of automation. And it is, because it's not this hard work that I used to think, it's going to take a long time. I got to really work on this, and I got to work on my shit, and I got to really do it. What I was really doing is reliving my Fred stories instead of dissolving them, instead of releasing them, and buying into that limitation rather than actually working on dissolving them and allowing them to dissolve. And so that's the whole purpose of why I started this community and what we're all about here, and what I'm doing with all of the particular trainings and content and different pieces that we're putting together here is to help us R&D Fred. And the second part of the reason for the I and the I Unstuck is I, me, you, us, individually, independence, that freedom that we want, independence, all of that, that's all encapsulated in the I, and it's about getting unstuck as a team, and making it easy and tapping into that technology, tapping into the dissolving. Why it's not about eradicating it, it's not about beating it up, it's about dissolving it, allowing it to be dissolved. And I'll let you know a little secret. Once you actually physically or mentally can see your Fred story to any degree, it automatically starts to dissolve, because you're making the unconscious conscious by focusing on it. Anyway, more about that when we start digging into some of the particulars of how to do it, and some of the case studies that I have for you.